today is an exciting day because much like Reshmi's presentation last week, McKensie is doing her first attempt at the presentation that will be done for our participation in the Lilly conference in Ohio in November. So we're really excited to get to share this with you all prior to that. So McKensie, who is newly McKensie Phillips, was Mackenzie Harris, as many of you met her, is an instructor in the animal science department, and she mainly teaches meat science. So it was fun to watch her during COVID taking the teaching of meat science home. The students were doing a lot of in-home lab work. So she's also the coach for the UW meat judging team and meat animal evaluation team. And last week when we were practicing the presentation, she was on the road with her meat judging team. Or was that the meat animal evaluation team?
That was meat judging.
The meat judging, perfect. And so they're well on their way to some of their bigger competitions now. So McKensie also was, of course, a Lamper in 2019, and she's in her 4th year here at UW, but that's kind of this, she sent me a little bit of a bio, and I looked at it and I thought to myself, yep, this is McKensie, because it is the most humble bio I've ever seen. And I think it fails to paint a picture of the incredible multi-dimensional human being that she is. And I actually have known McKensie for, I think it's now over a decade, and I had the incredible opportunity to meet her when she was a student in my Dan Micro class, and then went to be a student in my biochem class, and was one of the outstanding graduating seniors. And so our great fortune in bringing her back to UW, so it's really wrong to say that it's her 4th year. She's been such an incredible part of my life, and we are so lucky that she's back here at UW. The students are particularly lucky, and you're going to get to hear a bit about that today. So I will stop waxing rhapsodic, except to just say that McKensie brings me great joy and honor in being a part of my life. So take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. I see Ginkgo on there, and I didn't mention anything about my love for horses in that little bulleted list, Rachel. So I guess I've forgotten about my horses right now, and meat judging is on my mind.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully soon. Rachel, I might actually have to have you share because my computer crashed and my Zoom is not totally set up for just sharing.
No problem.
I'll just give you cues to advance.
It is my pleasure to do so. And I just noticed that Danny Dale just popped in, so it's so lovely to see you. Thank you for coming.
All right, so Rachel and I are going to tackle this together. Rachel is going to take some of the first portions of the presentation, and then I'm going to follow up with some very raw intuition on some knowledge surveys. We were looking at how increasing the use of a frequent knowledge survey throughout the semester might impact gains in student learning, and we have essentially 2 iterations of data that were collected to help us kind of piece apart some interesting findings that we're excited to share. So Rachel, if you want to advance to the next slide, I'll kind of go through just where we're going to go this morning. Rachel's going to cover what is a knowledge survey, and we are both very aware that you're probably somewhat familiar with a knowledge survey. Those participants in Ohio might not be as familiar, so we just wanted to make sure we were comprehensive in setting things up before I take on the fall 2019 trends that I saw, and then how that led into a fall 2020 research endeavor.
You bet. So, what is a knowledge survey? You all have been exposed to this. You, in fact, got many, many emails from Ed asking you to please complete knowledge surveys. And I feel like you're probably so familiar that you probably are feeling like you wish you wouldn't see another knowledge survey for a while. But I think it is so important to remember the metacognitive advantages that come from asking learners to engage with the conceptual and skill-based learning that they will be doing, that they are doing, and that they did. So our surveys, of course, ask learners to rate their confidence, their self-assessed competence, as we often call it. And in many cases, we pair that with an actual answer to a question. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. I wanted to share the particular rating that McKensie used for her students. So they mark, and here's Ed himself coming on in. So they mark a 2 if they feel like, dang, I could knock this out of the park right now. I can answer it sufficiently for a graded test. They mark 1 if they feel at least 50% confident. That is, that they think they would need to go take a little bit of time to brush up on this, and then they could mark their answer. But 0 is that response of like, what the heck are you talking about with this question? I really don't think I could do this right now. So we have done a lot of work, and as Ed pops into the room, I get to say how grateful I am that when I was put in charge of assessment many, many moons ago, I actually happened in on a presentation at a microbiology education conference that cited Ed, and it cited his work on knowledge service, his very early work. And so I was really inspired by the liberative strategies that he was using, asking learners about to self-assess their competence and asking them and valuing their confidence. So I began using knowledge surveys in Gen Micro and using them across courses there. And with that data, we were able to publish in the Journal of Microbiology and Biology Education our findings that students' competence and their self-assessed competence were correlating. This was, of course, a question that I got immediately in molecular biology when I said that I wanted to value students' rating of their confidence as a measure for assessment. The molecular biologists all looked at me and said, but Rachel, confidence doesn't align with competence. That is, they said, it doesn't matter. Someone thinks they know what they know. They don't know what they know. And so that began our journey into all of this. And I was able to join Ed's team after that. In fact, we like to joke that we met online. We met on ResearchGate, and the relationship has been long and storied since that time. And the particular instrument that we use in that team is the SLCI, which of course is that vetted instrument that has questions that span that what we see science as a way of knowing, as encompassing. And it is that general citizens literacy of science literacy that we're looking at with that. However, we do pair that often with the knowledge survey components. So our numbers are now, and Ed can give you specifics, but well over 25,000 respondents over nationwide, and more than well over 4,000 at the time that we presented the data that I'm about to show you from the SLCI and the paired knowledge survey. So it's helpful to recognize that, yes, there is a relationship between self-assessed competence and verified competence. And we see that that is true participant by participant, but overarchingly even more of a strong positive correlation when we look item by item on the items of the science literacy concept inventory. So our work has definitely shown that there is a validated and positive correlation in that. And we can look at that by level. That is the number of courses that students have completed in science. We can recognize that their self-assessed competence does in fact keep in pace with their SLCI competence score. So over on the left-hand side, their competence score, on the right-hand side, their self-assessed competence. And we also see that changing with notably with more than 4 science courses where students are starting to really demonstrably gain science literacy once they've had that immersion. Additionally, the findings, the long held 20 years of psychology data that held with this Dunning-Kruger hypothesis, saying that a majority of people are, quote, unskilled and unaware of it, our work has disproved that notion. So the current concerns that my microbiology or micro and molecular biology cohort had, that students don't know when they know, we've been able to disprove that notion, and that groups are not overly optimistic. Groups tend to be, in fact, quite adequate or good at self-assessment. This is also very important in framing McKensie's research, because she's now taken this to the next level of asking sort of what I would consider second generation questions around self-assessed competence and what we can learn that goes beyond just showing that, in fact, groups are fairly good at it and students are quite adequate. So this is an example of a question that would be on one of McKensie's knowledge surveys, where she has a picture that they're trying to determine what macromolecule is depicted in this image. They would rate their confidence. Remember, 2 is I can knock it out of the park. 1, I would need 20 minutes, maybe half confident about this. And 0, I have no idea what that macromolecule is. We can align these with course objectives. So you can begin with your course learning outcome that we see here, one of McKensie's, relate the science of food, chemical, biological, and physical parameters, trigger happy, to human nutrition, health, food processing, and everyday eating. And this can be turned into a question on a knowledge survey. So utilizing your learning outcomes as a starting point and then turning those into a question. What a wonderful way for students to engage with the learning outcomes, to see them as a question as to whether you are now feeling confident in your ability to do this. Can you do this? Using reliable internet sources, students will be able to outline the ingredient components of soda and explain their function in a soft drink with 100% accuracy. Look at that learning outcome, complete with conditions and standards that now the students can look at that. Can I do that? And can I do it with 100% accuracy? What do I mark on that knowledge survey, 2, 1, or 0? We can also put these into Bloom's levels and cognitive domains. We can go through our learning outcomes looking for what order skill we're asking them to do. And we can go back and see, based upon the data, which area of Bloom's students are feeling strongest or weakest in, both pre and post semester, or, as McKensie's going to start to talk about today, unit by unit. So I am going to hand things back over to McKensie to roll with some of this. Yeah.
All right. So this is going back to relating course objective to a knowledge survey. You can see at the end or towards the bottom of the slide, I have the knowledge survey question that is related to that student learning outcome. And you'll notice in this, we have what ingredient in each is providing the sweet taste. So for Coke and Diet Coke, that is simply a recall question, or the lower Bloom's level. And then the next question, why is it that diet soda provides 0 calories while regular soda provides 150 calories, even when their ingredient lists are so similar? That bumps up in a Zoom or a Bloom level to comprehension. Too much Zoom for me. All right, Rachel, you can go to the next slide. So just to break up Rachel and I rambling on at you, we're going to get you thinking this morning. So if you have a piece of scratch paper next to you, or you just want to type this on a sticky note on your computer, totally fine. But we're going to ask you to think about your own courses, one in particular, maybe you're teaching now or you're working on and plan to teach in the spring. So select one of those learning outcomes and then attempt to write 2 knowledge survey questions. And we're going to push you to write them at 2 different Bloom's levels. I've found that it's it's fairly easy to write recall and remembering questions. Maybe that's because through my educational tenure, I've answered a lot of those, and those are pretty easy. But as you work up, it gets a little more difficult. So maybe start with a recall and remember, and then see how that transpires to a higher Bloom's level. So we'll give you about, let's say 5 minutes. And if as you're doing this, you have questions or want to pipe in, please unmute and feel free to ask those questions. You'll notice on the graphic there, each Bloom level, different color, and then we've put verbs that relate typically to that Bloom level. So recall, remember, you might ask, what is the primary ingredient in soda? That's just an example. So there's some verbs for you to kind of rely on as you construct these questions. All right, it looks like those of you I can see on the screen, there might be some just nonverbal indicators that you're getting done, which is great. I see Monia thumbs up. Thanks, Monia, for that. I appreciate that. So the goal in you writing this down is to start thinking about, maybe it's easy to come up with knowledge survey questions. Maybe it's a little bit more challenging. And I might talk about a little of the journey that I took in the last 2 years, I guess now, in creating those knowledge survey questions. So Rachel, if you don't mind advancing. Just some background on the class that I'm specifically working with. It's Food Science 1410. It's an introductory course in essentially the science of food. It is offered in the fall, and in fall of 2019, I really had worked the summer previous redoing it, redesigning it to try to make it a little bit better. And so I broke it into units, and those are the green and blue bubbles you see. The first unit we started with was the anatomy unit, and we worked kind of around the circle in a clockwise direction. Towards the end of the semester, we got to the milk and dairy products. You might be wondering, what are those little pink bubbles? Those are topics that I intermittently threw into a number of units because they fit well in multiple. So I really broke it into units to discuss all the different types of food that I could in one semester, which is very, very challenging because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to food. Typically, I have a range of students in there. I have freshmen up to seniors, no particular major. This course is only required for the meat science and food technology option in the animal and veterinary science degree program. Usually I have only one or two of those students, and I have enrollments up to 2025. So a lot of variety and diversity in the student population. So in this process of introducing the knowledge survey to this course, I spent the summer of 2019, after I attended the LAMP program, developing a 48 question knowledge survey. So not a ton of questions, but that knowledge survey was intended for students to take at the beginning of the fall 2019 semester, and then once more at the end of the 19 semester. After that semester was over, I started to look at that data, and here's what I got. And I'll kind of explain this figure so we're all on the same page. Down on the x-axis, we have question number, so 1 through 48. On the y-axis, we work from 0 to 100%, and that's just level of confidence that students have. And then the blue bars are the pre-semester confidence rating. So we see on question 1, students on average were somewhere probably around 35% confident in answering that question, versus question 2, they were probably around 30%. So we see variability in pre-semester confidence. I'll draw your attention to question 28. There is no blue bar, so none of the students in the course felt like they had any clue answering one of the questions relative to the fruit and veggies unit. So at the top, you see I've broken each question into what unit they fall into, having those 9 units as we work across. The red bars are simply the difference or the confidence gain at the end of the semester. So that question number 3, we see students, we reached 100% confidence in answering that question, which is super exciting as an instructor. Either I did something right, or students, it clicked for them, something random happened. So super exciting that some of these questions we reach 100% or near 100%. If we look at question, let's say 27, we still see a gain in confidence, but we're still probably just under that 50% mark. So I could have done something maybe a little bit more or a little bit differently to try to achieve a higher confidence level. So Rachel, you can advance. So I just want to point out some differences in those units. So milk and dairy, you see a lot of white space, particularly question 44, 45, and 46. We actually didn't get to all of the milk and dairy unit because the end of the semester was approaching. I was a little behind schedule. So those 3 questions, I did not cover any material. So it's interesting that some students felt a little bit more confident in that. Maybe that was just the product of them having gone through the semester and heard a few buzzwords in other units that related to that question, or it was towards the end of the semester, they wanted to be done with the semester and kind of rush through that knowledge survey. The cereal, grains, and baked goods section or unit, we also see a lot of white space, didn't achieve really, really high levels of confidence. And that one really struck out to me. I was like, what is maybe different? And I don't have statistical analysis here, but it's just visual observation on this chart. What happened in the cereal, grains, and baked goods section that might have caused some lower confidence? Rachel, I think if you go to the next one, yes. So I just started to think about, okay, maybe my teaching strategy was a little bit different from unit to unit, or at the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester. Keep in mind, I was trying to implement a lot of active learning teaching strategies this semester. I just finished my LAMP participation. Rachel and the group were very inspiring and I wanted to try it all. So I felt like I was doing a lot of new things, but that was pretty consistent from unit to unit. It's not like I was doing one particular strategy in individual units. So I don't know if that was very telling, and it'd be hard to kind of piece apart. Rachel, the next one, we can think about unit length. Okay, so I have across the top in the purple how long each unit was spent, and that's class days, not necessarily consecutive days. So the cereal, grains, and baked good unit was the longest unit. Meat and poultry is close behind. So maybe because we spent so much time in that, we packed in a lot of information and that all got jumbled together versus like the eggs unit, and it was only 2 days and we saw pretty high confidence. Again, this is just me kind of thinking out loud. The next is unit location. Okay, so that gray arrow in the middle points to the middle of the semester. We see we have 4 units prior to the middle and then 5 to follow. And that cereal, grains, and baked goods section was week 3 through 5. So fairly early on, the students might still have been getting to know me and know the style of the course, and that might have played into it. And so I really wanted to think about how unit location could impact assessment of confidence. So that really leads us into the fall 2020, the next iteration of the course. I was looking at that data and I was like, can I do something to try to piece this apart? And so my research question became, do we see a difference in confidence in answering test questions at the end of a unit versus at the end of the semester? So maybe students could be more confident answering questions at the end of that cereal, grains, and baked goods section when it was fresh on their mind, they had just finished it, versus maybe towards the end of the semester when it was 7-8 weeks later. So I developed I don't want to say new, it was new knowledge survey, but those original 48 questions were still in that 194 question knowledge survey. So hugely expanded knowledge survey. I was much more detailed with my student learning outcomes. So that's why it became much larger. And those students in fall of 2020 took the pre-semester knowledge survey at the beginning. They also took it at the end, same kind of format, but after each unit, so 9 different times, they took just the post-unit knowledge survey. So those questions related to the unit we had just finished. Some things to know as I start talking about what I'm seeing in fall 2020 is that the course was set up fairly similar between the 2 semesters I've been working on this knowledge survey stuff. Mind you, fall 2020 was in the midst of our COVID pandemic, so I did have to present some of that material online through Zoom. I do try to incorporate some small labs throughout the semester, and some of those labs had to be done at home, but I feel fairly confident that the students were able to get most everything the same out of both of those semesters. In fall of 2020, 13 of the 25 students completed all of the knowledge surveys, so pre, post-unit, and post-semester. There was an incentive to do that. I dropped the lowest quiz score for them if they completed all of the knowledge surveys. And then the pre and post-semester were the only required ones. They did not have to do post-unit, and that was 4.5% of their final grade. Some other things to know. Yep, go ahead, Rachel. Those knowledge surveys were taken on our learning management system through WIO courses. So it was an online platform. After the conclusion of the unit, students had 1 week to complete those. So plenty of time. Sometimes if I tracked the time it took students to take, it took 2.5 minutes. Some of them took 45 minutes, depending on how many questions they were going through. And now is the time to introduce Ella DeWolf. She has been an instrumental partner in this research endeavor. She has been helpful in the statistical analysis. So she has led us in trying to be most accurate in our assessment of what we're seeing from the results perspective. And so I just want to make greatest shout out to her. Thank you, Ella, for all your work. We ran general linear mixed effects models, and our random effects were student and question number. So let's jump into what we were seeing. Please don't feel overwhelmed by what you're seeing on the screen. We were overwhelmed at first, and this is a condensed version of what we originally had. So I just want to show you that we broke the results by unit, and we see question numbers varied. The number of question quantity varied from unit to unit. And we can see if we plot, we have post unit in the blue, post semester in the yellow, and then a grade area. So Rachel, if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to choose the candy one just to make it very simple in how we can get through understanding what's going on here. So rather than percent confidence on the y-axis for these, we just stuck with a rating of 0, 1, and 2 to stay more true to the knowledge survey and what the students were marking. We see that in the shaded grayed out boxes, those are pre-semester confidence levels. So for example, question 138, students were not very confident. Question 141, students were very confident starting at the beginning of the semester. And then in the blue boxes, we have post-unit confidence. Yellow is post-semester. So Candy, if I'm not mistaken, is just somewhere over halfway through the semester. So we're getting towards probably Halloween time. Actually, I think it was Halloween, so I was trying to do something related to candy for Halloween. It's very fitting. And so just visually, we see some of the questions, students were more confident post-unit, but other questions, some of the students were confident more so post-semester. So some visual differences. If we go back up to the next slide, Rachel, we can see this varies from unit to unit. So we ran some statistical analysis. It's hard to do that without averaging the averages. So let's go to the next slide, Rachel. And we just broke it by unit. So the average of all the questions in each unit is what you're seeing here. And we're seeing that visually the yellow bars are higher than the blue bars. And there is a statistical difference here, okay? Students are more confident answering questions post-semester versus post-unit, okay? So we were excited to see that, and maybe didn't align with what we originally thought, but to see this consistency along at the end of the semester was exciting. One thing I do want to note, that dairy section, it just so happened it was the last unit. So the post-semester knowledge survey they took was considered to be their post-unit. So that's why they're the same level. Okay, so just want to clarify that. So if we go to the next slide, we're just going to touch on some conclusions. If we bring this all back to our research question, is there a difference in confidence post-unit and post-semester? We can say yes, and that is at a statistical significance. And if we think about that more, because the post-semester were always higher, students are more confident at the end of the semester than at the end of the unit. I've delved into the literature a little bit, not extensively. I do plan to put together a publication for this, so I will get more and more into that as I progress on that project. And interestingly, the literature agrees with this from what I can see. Most students by the end of the semester build confidence, whether that's in actual competency, where they're taking actual test questions and being graded on the accuracy, or when we think about confidence, okay? So next slide, Rachel, we can just kind of create some discussion points. I just want to clarify that we did not have a control group in this situation. I did not have two sections, and one section was the only one doing post-unit, the other was just doing post-semester. But really what we were after, the focus of the research, was to track changes over time. So our baseline and control would probably be considered our pre-semester confidence. And then we build from there to see change over time. The blue box there, although post-semester confidence was higher than post-unit, it's a very small difference, okay? What we should realize is that the difference pre and post, no matter if it's post-unit or post-semester, is the bigger difference. So that's exciting to see that our students are learning more. They're more confident in themselves as we go through material and implement active learning strategies to help them understand the science of food in this situation. We also want to think about this idea of culmination of confidence. Originally, I had hypothesized that students would be more confident post-unit. simply because it's fresher on their mind. If you ask probably any student on campus or any campus, they get really excited when they do not have cumulative finals. Okay. So just having the material fresh and they can focus on that and then be done with it as they move to the next unit, that gets them excited. And I don't know if that excitement comes from they're more confident. That's what I would have assumed, but that's not what we're seeing in the data here. And I mentioned that bullet, did I plan for this? I was not very strategic in thinking, I'm going to build unit to unit. Typically, the units could have been very much siloed. There was not a lot of overlap, some, but not a lot. So it wasn't like I had a strategy to build knowledge through those units and touch on different topics multiple times and increase level of understanding as we worked from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester. So I think it's quite interesting that we're still seeing post-semester confidence is higher than post-unit. And then the last one to think about there, in fall of 2019, there was simply 2 times the students answered knowledge survey questions beginning and end of semester. We throw in a 3rd time for the fall 2020. So we might have to think about, yes, the students are seeing those questions one more time. Is there term familiarity and is that improving confidence? And I think we can all agree that as students hear things more often, they start to recognize those, and that's gaining muscle memory and the brain system. And okay, I'm starting to get this more and more. So just some discussion points to think about. I'd be interested if any of you have comments on those. And I think that finishes that up for us, right, Rachel?
Yeah, thank you so much, McKenzie. You're a rock star.
Thank you all for being here in the morning.
Yeah.